The California sun shimmered off the ocean, gilding the palm trees and the glass mansions of Newport Beach. The air smelled of salt, new money, and old loneliness. Victoria Hale pressed harder on the gas of her Lamborghini Urus, its golden yellow body slicing through the coastal road like a flame. She liked the way people looked when she passed, eyes lingering, mouths parting, envy blooming like a quiet perfume in her wake. 2 years ago, she couldn't even get out of bed. Now every roar of the engine reminded her she was still alive, or at least pretending to be. Her husband, Richard Hale, had died in a private jet accident at 41, the CEO of one of the country's largest aerospace companies. His name still hovered in business magazines and in the mouths of men who toasted him at charity galas. But Victoria knew the truth. Behind the wealth and prestige, Richard had been broken too, always chasing more, always running from silence. And when that jet exploded over the Pacific, it left behind not just a widow, but a woman who had built her identity around someone else's success. So now she filled the void with things: cars, diamonds, lavish events where she smiled too wide and drank too much champagne. Everyone still called her the lucky widow. She called herself the unfinished one. That morning, Victoria had left her mansion late, speeding toward a lunch meeting with her financial advisor. Her designer heels clicked impatiently against the accelerator as the dashboard flashed with warning lights. At first, she ignored them, as she always did. But when the car started to sputter, her heart dropped. "Oh, come on," she muttered, slapping the steering wheel. "Not today." The Urus lurched once, twice, then died in the middle of a 4-lane street. Horns blared behind her. Unbelievable. She threw the car in park, stepping out in her cream-colored suit and oversized sunglasses. Heads turned. A glamorous woman standing helpless beside a $500,000 car. Within minutes, she was on her phone with roadside assistance, pacing angrily. "Ma'am, it'll be at least 45 minutes before a tow truck can get there," the voice on the other end said. 45 minutes? Do you have any idea who I am?" "No, ma'am," came the flat reply. Victoria hung up, exhaling sharply. That's when she noticed a small, weathered building across the street. A garage with a hand-painted sign that read Grace Motors Honest Work. Honest price. The logo was simple, a silver cross made from 2 wrenches. She almost laughed. Grace Motors. Oh, that's cute. Still, she was impatient. And prideful as she was, she hated feeling helpless. So she crossed the street, heels clacking against the pavement, her frustration practically glowing off her. Inside, the smell of motor oil and coffee filled the air. Tools clinked softly. A radio hummed an old gospel song in the background. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. At the far end of the garage stood Ethan Cole, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a navy blue jumpsuit. His hair was dark, his expression calm, the kind of calm that came from a heart with nothing to prove. He looked up when she entered. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Victoria crossed her arms. "My car broke down. I need someone to look at it. Now." Ethan smiled politely. "Sure thing." "What kind of car are we talking about?" She gestured outside. "A Lamborghini Urus." He raised an eyebrow. "Fancy. I don't do fancy," she snapped. "I do quality. So if you can't handle it, I'll wait for someone who can." Ethan didn't flinch. "I'll take a look. Might take a few minutes, though. These imports can be sensitive," she scoffed. "It's not a toddler. It's a car worth more than your shop." The words hung in the air. The 2 older mechanics nearby looked up from their work, glancing awkwardly between them. Ethan just smiled. "Guess we'll see who's worth more, the car or the patience." Victoria frowned. "Excuse me?" He gestured politely toward the open bay door. "If you'll show me where she's parked, I'll take a look." Outside, Ethan opened the hood and leaned in. Victoria stood beside him, tapping her manicured nails against her phone case. "Any day now," she muttered. He chuckled softly. You know, my wife says the same thing when I'm fixing the toaster. Victoria blinked. Your wife? Yeah, Rachel. Been married 6 years. She tilted her head, studying him. The calm way he spoke, the ring on his finger worn thin, the way he smiled without trying to impress. It bothered her, somehow. Must be hard, she said coolly. Not being able to give her more. Ethan looked up from the engine, meeting her gaze. Depends what you mean by more. Money, security, a nice house. The kind of life women dream about. He smiled faintly. My wife doesn't dream about houses. She dreams about heaven. Victoria blinked, almost laughing. Heaven? You're one of those people. Ethan wiped his hands. If you mean people who believe in something bigger than themselves, yeah, I guess I am. She rolled her eyes. Well, good for you. The rest of us have to live in the real world. He leaned down, tightened a bolt, and said, maybe that's the problem. A small crowd had begun to gather outside. Locals, curious at the sight of a millionaire widow standing beside a Lamborghini and a mechanic who didn't seem intimidated. Someone shouted jokingly from the sidewalk, Hey Vic, you gonna let him fix that thing or what? Victoria smirked, turning toward the onlookers. Sure, she said loudly, her pride taking over. Tell you what, if this man can fix my car, I'll marry him. Laughter erupted. Ethan looked up, smiling patiently. You don't have to say things you don't mean, ma'am. Oh, don't worry, she said mockingly. You're safe. Men like you don't fix cars like this. He looked at her quietly, eyes steady. You might be surprised what men like me can fix. Her smile faltered. He turned the ignition key. The engine roared to life instantly, smooth, perfect, powerful. The crowd gasped. Victoria's eyes widened. What did you? Loose sensor, he said simply. $10 part. 2 minutes of patience. Her jaw tightened. She opened her purse. How much do I owe you? Ethan shook his head. No charge, she blinked. Excuse me. He smiled softly. Some lessons you can't buy. The crowd began to disperse, whispering about what had just happened. Victoria stood frozen, unsure whether to feel humiliated or impressed. She finally spoke, her tone icy. You think you've proved something, don't you? Ethan shrugged. Not really, but maybe God did. She laughed sharply. God, he didn't fix my car. You did. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. He fixed it through me. Same way he can fix a heart, if it's willing. The words hit her harder than she expected. She opened her mouth to retort, but nothing came out. He closed the hood gently, nodded, and began walking back toward the shop. Before he disappeared, he turned slightly and said, If you ever want to fix more than cars, Grace Motors is open 7 days a week. Victoria watched him go, her throat dry, her pride cracking just a little. She climbed into her car, the leather seat suddenly feeling colder than usual. As she drove off, the words echoed in her mind like a song she couldn't stop hearing. He can fix a heart, if it's willing. She pressed harder on the gas, trying to drown it out. But even as the Urus purred perfectly again, the silence inside her chest had never been louder. That night, the ocean wind howled through the streets of Newport Beach, rattling the palm fronds outside Victoria Hale's mansion. The house sat high above the cliffs, a sprawling work of glass, marble, and emptiness. Every echo of her footsteps bounced back at her like a reminder. You can fill a space, but not a soul. She poured herself a glass of red wine and sank into the white leather sofa, staring at the glow of the city below. The Lamborghini key rested on the glass coffee table. She picked it up, turning it between her fingers, and replayed the moment in her mind. The look in Ethan's eyes when he said it. He fixed it through me. Same way he can fix a heart, if it's willing. She laughed under her breath, trying to dismiss it. Fix my heart, sure. But something about his tone, steady, certain, had cut through her like a clean blade. He hadn't said it like a man trying to impress. He'd said it like a man who knew. She set down the glass and stood, pacing. It had been 2 years since the jet crash. 2 years of therapists, parties, meaningless company. 2 years of smiling for cameras, pretending the loss hadn't hollowed her. But no one had ever spoken to her like that. Not the way Ethan Cole had, with gentle truth that stung worse than cruelty. By morning, she was restless. She told herself she had errands to run in the city, but somehow, her car ended up parked right in front of Grace Motors again. The same modest sign hung above the door. The same smell of oil and coffee drifted through the air. The radio was on again, a different gospel tune this time. I once was lost, but now am found. Ethan looked up from under the hood of an old pickup truck. His hands were black with grease, his expression focused but serene. He noticed her immediately, though not the way other men did. Not like she was an object, but like she was a question. "Back again?" he asked, wiping his hands. Victoria lifted her chin slightly. "Don't flatter yourself. I just wanted to make sure you didn't mess anything up yesterday." He smiled faintly. "You came all this way to check on me?" She frowned. "Don't make it sound weird." "Didn't say it was," he replied, turning back to the truck. "But I'm guessing that car of yours isn't the only thing that's been acting up lately." She folded her arms. "Excuse me?" He looked up again, eyes calm. "You seem restless," she scoffed. "You fix engines, not people." "Don't overestimate yourself," Ethan chuckled. "Engines are easier. They break for mechanical reasons. People break for invisible ones." Victoria hesitated. She wanted to respond, but the words tangled somewhere between irritation and curiosity. As she turned to leave, a voice from inside the garage caught her attention. "Ethan, we got another one coming in." The Lewis family's van finally gave out again. Ethan nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "Tell them I'll take care of it." A few minutes later, an old minivan pulled up, its paint fading, its tires bald. A woman climbed out with 2 kids clinging to her coat. She looked exhausted. Ethan greeted her with the same kindness he'd shown Victoria. "Morning, Mrs. Lewis. How's Jacob's asthma doing?" The woman smiled weakly. "Better. That medicine you helped us get made all the difference. Thank you again, Ethan." He waved it off. "Don't thank me. Thank the one who provided." Victoria watched from a distance, puzzled. The family didn't pay a cent. Ethan worked on their car for nearly an hour, talking gently to the kids, laughing with them. When the woman tried to hand him a crumpled 20, he shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "Use it for groceries. God's got us covered." Victoria stepped forward finally, crossing her arms. "Do you just work for free?" Ethan straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sometimes. Is that smart?" He shrugged. "Maybe not. But it's right." She tilted her head, studying him. "You actually believe that, don't you? That some invisible God keeps your bills paid?" Ethan smiled. "Not always on time, but always on purpose." She laughed, a dry, incredulous laugh. "You really are something else. Most people are," he said. "They just forget." Later, as she stood by her car ready to leave, she noticed a small building next to the garage. A modest structure with a sign that read, "Grace Community Fellowship, Sundays at 9 and 11. She frowned. "So the mechanic's a pastor too?" Ethan followed her gaze. "My wife's the real pastor. I just help when I can." "You mean to tell me that little church belongs to you?" "Belongs to God," he said. "We just borrow the keys." She shook her head, muttering, "You're impossible, or just consistent." Their eyes met, not with flirtation, but with that strange gravity that happens when 2 worlds crash together. Victoria looked away first. "Well, thanks for whatever that was. I'll be going now." He nodded. "Take care, Mrs. Hawley. Drive safe. And remember, not everything that runs smoothly is healthy." She raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Even engines can sound perfect while falling apart inside." Her chest tightened. You always talk like that? Only when someone needs to hear it. Back home, she poured herself another glass of wine but didn't drink it. Instead, she found herself staring at her reflection in the window, the ocean behind her, endless and empty. She could still hear his voice. Even engines can sound perfect while falling apart inside. It bothered her because it was true. Her life looked flawless. The mansion, the money, the admiration. But inside, the silence after her husband's death had become a cavern she filled with noise and motion. For the first time in years, she whispered, "God, if you're real, what's wrong with me?" The question hung unanswered in the quiet house. Outside, the waves crashed against the cliffs, steady and relentless, like a heartbeat that refused to stop believing. The next morning, she drove again, not toward the city this time, but back toward Grace Motors. She told herself it was for maintenance, but her heart whispered something different. When she parked, Ethan wasn't in the garage. Instead, she saw him across the lot, helping unload boxes of canned food into the church next door. Curiosity tugged at her. She followed, watching through the open door as he and his wife Rachel laughed together, sorting donations. Rachel was nothing like Victoria expected. Warm, natural, radiant without effort. Her jeans were worn, her smile easy. She watched them pray with a small group before serving food to a line of families waiting outside. No cameras, no headlines. Just love, raw, unpolished, real. Victoria stood there frozen, arms crossed, not sure if she was more confused or convicted. When Ethan finally noticed her, he smiled and waved her over. "Didn't expect you again so soon. I was just passing by," she said, awkwardly. Rachel walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. "Hi there. I'm Rachel." Victoria hesitated, shaking her hand. "Victoria Hale." Rachel's eyes widened slightly. "The Victoria Hale? From Hale Aviation?" "Formerly," Victoria said quietly. Rachel smiled warmly. "It's a blessing to meet you." Victoria looked around the modest church interior, folding tables, paper plates, children running, laughter echoing. Something inside her twisted. "You run all this?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "We try. God does most of the work." She looked at him, eyes narrowing. "You actually believe he cares about stuff like this?" Ethan nodded. "He cares about people. And people are stuff like this." Victoria didn't know what to say. Before she could respond, Rachel spoke softly. "You're welcome here anytime, Victoria. No judgment. Just grace." That word again. Grace. It followed her like a shadow she couldn't shake. That night, she lay awake in her massive bed, the city lights painting faint patterns on the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about them, about the mechanic and his wife, about the joy they carried without reason. It wasn't weakness, it was strength, the kind that didn't need to shout. And for the first time in years, Victoria whispered something she hadn't dared say aloud since the day of the crash. "God, if you're still there, fix me too." The house remained silent, but deep in her heart, something began to stir, quiet, trembling, alive. The next week crawled by. For someone like Victoria Hale, used to a schedule filled with noise, lunches, meetings, meaningless errands, the silence now felt heavier than ever. Everywhere she went, she kept thinking about Grace Motors, about Ethan's calm eyes, about Rachel's warmth, about that single word that seemed to chase her through her dreams, Grace. It didn't make sense. Why did a woman who had everything feel haunted by the kindness of people who had so little? She told herself it was curiosity. But the truth was simpler and far more unsettling. For the first time in her life, she'd seen real peace. And it made her realize how empty her own version was. It was Thursday morning when she finally gave in. She parked her black Range Rover across the street from Grace Motors, the Lamborghini sitting idle in her garage, almost symbolic now. The shop was busy, as usual. She stood in the doorway watching Ethan beneath the hood of a rusted Chevy. He didn't see her at first, but when he did, his expression didn't shift in surprise or smugness. Just that same calm, unbothered presence. "Morning, Mrs. Hawley," he said. "Didn't expect to see you here again." Victoria crossed her arms. "Apparently I can't stay away from low-income entertainment," Ethan chuckled. "You're consistent." "I'll give you that." She frowned, half expecting him to be offended, but he wasn't. He just kept working, humming softly along to a song playing from a small radio nearby. "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come." The lyric made her chest tighten. She cleared her throat. "So, that church next door, it's really yours?" "It's ours," Ethan corrected. "Rachel's and mine, but mostly God's." She rolled her eyes. "You keep saying that. God this, God that. Like he's your business partner or something." He smiled faintly. "He's more like the owner. I just manage the tools." She shook her head, half amused, half frustrated. "You really believe all that? Every word? Even after everything the world throws at you?" He wiped his hands and leaned against the car. "Especially after that." Something about his tone disarmed her. Victoria found herself walking further into the garage, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. For a moment, the air smelled like oil and purpose. She realized it was the first place in years that didn't feel fake. "So," she said, forcing nonchalance, "you and your wife actually live off this?" Ethan nodded. "Between the shop and the church, yeah. We get by." "And you're happy?" He smiled. "Happier than I ever was when I had more." Victoria tilted her head. "You had more?" "Once," he said quietly. "I used to work corporate, six-figure job, big office, bigger ego. Thought I was untouchable." She raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" He looked up at her, eyes steady. "I lost it all. Company downsized. I lost my position, my identity, almost my marriage. And one night, when everything was falling apart, I prayed for the first time in my life, not for success, not for money, just for peace." He paused, a small smile forming. "And the next day, I found it. Not in a promotion, not in a paycheck, in here." He tapped his chest. "Right where I used to hide my pride." Victoria blinked. "That's poetic." "Unrealistic, but poetic," he chuckled. "Maybe, but the truth usually sounds unrealistic until you live it." They stood there for a moment, the hum of tools filling the silence between them. Then Rachel appeared, waving from across the lot. "Ethan, lunch is ready," he grinned. "Coming, sweetheart." When Rachel saw Victoria, her smile didn't falter. "Mrs. Hawley." "You're back," Victoria nodded awkwardly. I had some car questions." Rachel laughed softly. "Don't we all? You hungry?" "We've got sandwiches." Victoria blinked. "You're offering me a sandwich?" Rachel shrugged. "We offer everyone a sandwich." Against her better judgment, Victoria followed them to the back of the shop where a small table was set up, a few folding chairs, a cooler of sweet tea, paper plates. It felt humble, real. She sat stiffly, watching them bow their heads before eating. Then prayed aloud, "Thank you, Lord, for this food, this work, and even the interruptions you send our way, because they're usually blessings in disguise." Victoria peeked at him mid-prayer, realizing with a small jolt that he was talking about her. As they ate, Rachel asked gentle questions about Victoria's life, her interests, what she did before. Victoria gave short, polished answers until Rachel asked quietly, "Do you miss him?" The words hit like a tremor. She froze, setting down her sandwich. "What? Your husband," Rachel said softly. "You still wear your ring." Victoria looked down at her hand. She hadn't even realized it. The diamond still glimmered, but now it felt like a shackle. "I don't miss him," she lied. "I miss who I thought I was when he was alive." Ethan and Rachel said nothing. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was compassionate, patient. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "Grief's a funny thing. It's not about losing someone. It's about finding yourself again afterward." Victoria swallowed hard. "And what if you don't like who you find?" Ethan met her eyes. "Then let God rebuild her." Her throat tightened. She turned away quickly. "I don't do religion." He nodded. "Good. God's not offering religion. He's offering restoration." That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. The words played over and over in her mind. Restoration. Rebuild her. Around midnight, she poured herself a drink, but it tasted bitter. She turned on the TV, but every show felt hollow. Finally, she opened her phone and typed Grace Community Fellowship into Google. The search results showed photos of Ethan and Rachel serving meals, children's programs, community drives. One picture showed Ethan with grease still on his hands, leading a prayer circle right in the middle of the shop. The caption read, "Faith doesn't need a stage. Just a willing heart." Something broke inside her then, quiet, unannounced, like glass cracking under pressure. She closed her phone, pressed her palms to her eyes, and whispered, "God, if you really rebuild people, start with me." On Sunday morning, she found herself driving, without planning, without purpose, to Grace Community Fellowship. The small building was full. People of every color, age, and background filled the folding chairs. Children laughed. Someone played guitar softly as the congregation sang, "I once was lost, but now am found." Victoria stood in the doorway, frozen. Rachel saw her first and smiled, motioning her in. "You made it." Victoria sat quietly in the back, unsure why tears burned at the corners of her eyes. Ethan stood at the front, speaking simply, not preaching at people, but talking to them. "We all come into God's shop with different problems," he said. "Some of us need an oil change, a small correction. Others need a full rebuild. But the good news is, the mechanic never gives up on the engine he designed." The congregation chuckled softly. Victoria's lips parted. She understood every word and hated how much it made sense. When the service ended, she slipped out quickly, not wanting to be seen. But halfway to her car, she stopped. She didn't want to run anymore. That afternoon, she returned to Grace Motors. Ethan was closing up. He looked surprised but not startled. "Back again?" She nodded. Her voice was small. "You were right." "About what?" She swallowed. "Everything." He set down his tools. "Then I guess that means you're ready to be fixed." She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "I think so." Ethan walked closer, speaking gently. "You don't have to earn God's love, Victoria. You just have to stop fighting it." The words hit her like warmth after a storm. She nodded slowly. "Teach me," Ethan smiled. "That's not my job. That's his, but we'll walk with you." That night she prayed for the first time in years, really prayed. Not with fancy words, not with demands. Just tears, honesty, surrender. "God, I don't know who you are anymore, but if you can take what's left of me, it's yours." And for the first time since the jet crash, she slept through the night. No dreams, no ghosts, just peace. The next morning felt lighter. Victoria Hale woke to the sound of waves breaking softly against the cliffs below her mansion. But for the first time, that sound didn't echo loneliness. It sounded like invitation. She brewed coffee and sat by the window, staring at the sky blushing pink over the Pacific. Everything looked the same. The gleaming marble floors, the fresh flowers, the expensive silence. But something inside her had changed. There was a small Bible on the table beside her. Ethan had given it to her the day before. Worn leather, small handwritten notes in the margins, a few grease stains on the edges. He'd said simply, "It's seen better hands than mine." Now she opened it for the first time. Her eyes landed on a verse underlined in fading ink. "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." Ezekiel 36-26. She read it again, then again. Tears she didn't understand welled up and fell quietly onto the page. She whispered, "Okay, God, start with this stone." That week, Victoria went back to Grace Motors almost every day, not for her car, but for the peace she found there. She helped Rachel hand out food. She washed dishes. She even folded donated clothes. At first, the volunteers whispered behind her back, "That's Victoria Holly, the millionaire." But within days, she was just Victoria, no makeup, no designer heels. Just a woman trying to learn what it meant to live again. Ethan never treated her differently. He never congratulated her for being there, never pitied her, never treated her as special. And somehow, that was the most healing thing of all. One Saturday, after a long day serving at the food drive, Victoria sat on the church steps beside Ethan as the sun dipped below the horizon. Children's laughter echoed from the parking lot as volunteers packed up tables. "You really think God forgives everything?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Everything that's confessed, everything that's surrendered." Her voice trembled. "Even the parts we can't forgive ourselves for. Especially those." She wiped her eyes. "I spent years pretending I was okay. Even when I blamed God for taking Richard, I thought, if I looked strong enough, maybe I'd convince myself." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You don't have to perform for God. He already saw the show." She laughed through her tears. "You make it sound so simple." He smiled. "It's simple. Not easy." The following Sunday, Victoria did something unthinkable. She walked into Grace Community Fellowship again, this time not to hide in the back row, but to sit in the front. Rachel led worship with a small team, her voice imperfect but full of soul. The lyrics filled the little church. "I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see." Victoria sang softly at first, her voice shaking. By the second verse, she couldn't stop crying. Every word felt like it was written for her. When the song ended, she stayed on her knees long after everyone else stood. Rachel came over quietly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're home now," she whispered. In the weeks that followed, Victoria began spending more time with Ethan and Rachel outside the church. They'd invite her to small dinners, homemade meals in their modest home, where laughter filled the spaces her mansion had never known. She met people from their congregation, a nurse who worked double shifts, a single dad trying to raise 3 kids, a teenager who'd overcome addiction. Every story was stitched together with one thread, hope. And every time she listened, Victoria felt her own heart loosen. The pieces that had been frozen for years were starting to thaw. One evening, after dinner, she found herself standing in the backyard of Ethan and Rachel's home, watching fireflies blink in the twilight. Ethan joined her quietly. "You've changed," he said. She smiled faintly. "You keep saying that. I don't mean just spiritually," he continued. "You're softer, quieter, you listen more." She laughed. "I think that's because for once, I'm not the one talking about myself," he smiled. "That's the best kind of healing." She hesitated. "You and Rachel, you really think God brought me here for a reason?" Ethan nodded. "I know he did." "Why?" He looked out at the horizon. "Because broken people attract broken people, and healed people heal them." Victoria stared at him, something sparking in her chest. "You think I could help someone?" "Me? I think you already have," he said simply. "You just don't see it yet." A few days later, Victoria invited Ethan and Rachel to her mansion. They hesitated at first, uncomfortable with the idea, but she insisted. When they arrived, they were stunned by the vastness of it. Marble floors, chandeliers, a panoramic ocean view. Rachel smiled gently. "It's beautiful." Victoria looked around, her voice quiet. "It used to be. Now it just feels like a tomb." They sat together in her living room. On the coffee table were piles of documents, financial records, business holdings, property deeds. "I've been thinking," Victoria began. "All this, it doesn't do anything for me anymore." I want it to mean something. Ethan leaned forward. What are you saying? I want to help, she said simply. I want to build something that lasts longer than me. Rachel's eyes widened. Victoria, you don't have to. I do, she interrupted gently. God didn't give me a second chance just to spend it polishing marble floors. There was silence for a long moment. Then Ethan spoke softly. Pray about it first. She nodded. I have. That night, Victoria walked through her mansion alone, touching the walls like she was saying goodbye. Every room told a story of status, success, sorrow. In her late husband's study, she paused by his old flight jacket hanging behind glass. She whispered, "You always said money was just fuel. Maybe now I know where to fly it." The next morning, she made her decision. She called her financial team and told them to prepare a transfer, not to another investment, but to Grace Community Fellowship. When her lawyer asked, "How much, Mrs. Hawley?" she smiled through tears. 70%, he stammered, "of your net worth?" "Yes," she said calmly. "Of everything." He stared in disbelief. "You'll be walking away from hundreds of millions of dollars." Victoria nodded. "Walking away from the weight, you mean?" When she told Ethan and Rachel, they were speechless. Rachel covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. "Victoria, this will change everything." Victoria smiled. "That's the point." Ethan stood silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "God just turned your mourning into ministry." She laughed softly. "Then let's get to work." Weeks later, the transformation began. With her donation, Grace Community Fellowship launched the Grace Foundation, a network of churches, shelters, and community centers across the country. Within a year, they'd built 10 churches, then 50, then 100, reaching across borders, building schools and hospitals, rescuing children from poverty and abuse. Every news outlet told her story, the millionaire who found faith, but Victoria refused interviews. When a journalist finally cornered her at a charity event, asking, "Why did you give so much away?" she smiled and said, "Because a mechanic once told me that not everything that runs smoothly is healthy." And he was right. The world took notice. When Victoria Hawley announced her donation, a staggering 70% of her wealth, the media exploded. Headlines filled every outlet. Millionaire widow gives away fortune to local church. From jetliner tragedy to faithful. Transformation. Victoria Hale's redemption story. The mechanic and the millionaire. A partnership forged in grace. But Victoria ignored the noise. While cameras wanted glamour and gossip, she was busy lifting boxes at a new children's center, wearing jeans and a simple blue shirt with Grace Foundation stitched on the chest. When a reporter tried to shove a microphone in her face, she smiled politely and said, "I'm not the story. The kids are." And she meant it. Within the first year, the foundation grew faster than anyone predicted. The first church expansion opened in Compton, Los Angeles, inside a converted warehouse where hundreds of families now gathered each week. The next in Detroit, where abandoned lots became playgrounds. Then Dallas, New Orleans, Chicago, cities once forgotten, now bursting with new life. Each new community had one thing in common: love that asked for nothing in return. Ethan and Rachel refused to build cathedrals or fancy offices. They used Victoria's donation to fund schools, food banks, addiction recovery programs, and shelters for victims of abuse. They called it Grace in Action. Victoria often visited these new centers quietly, without announcement. One afternoon, she sat on the floor of a daycare in Houston, surrounded by children coloring with broken crayons and wide smiles. A little girl looked up at her and asked, "Miss Victoria, are you rich?" Victoria paused, then smiled. "Not the kind you mean, sweetie." "What kind then?" "The kind that doesn't fit in a bank." The girl nodded seriously, then handed her a crayon. "You can color too." So she did. And for the first time in her life, the colors made sense. Meanwhile, Ethan and Rachel's ministry became a phenomenon. What started as one garage church in a forgotten corner of Newport Beach turned into a global network of 100 churches, each one planted by teams trained and supported by the Grace Foundation. They preached not with loud slogans, but with quiet compassion. They built water wells, orphanages, and schools. And in every country they touched, from Kenya to the Philippines, from Brazil to India, people whispered the same thing. Grace came here. Within 5 years, their humanitarian projects had fed over 2 million children, rebuilt thousands of homes, and educated entire villages. When journalists asked Ethan what the secret was, he always gave the same answer: "We just fixed what was broken." That's what mechanics do. Back home in California, Victoria's life was unrecognizable. Her mansion had been sold. She now lived in a modest beachfront home, small, cozy, with a front porch overlooking the sea. She still drove, but not a Lamborghini. Her car now was a used Ford Explorer, its backseat filled with boxes of donated shoes and children's books. People sometimes recognized her and asked, "Why would someone like you give up everything?" She'd smile and reply, "Because I already had everything, and it was killing me." One evening, Ethan and Rachel came to visit her. They sat on her porch watching the sunset, the sky painted in gold and coral. Rachel turned to her. "You know, Victoria, sometimes I still can't believe what's happened." Victoria smiled softly. "Neither can I," Ethan nodded. "We started with a broken car," Victoria laughed, "and ended up fixing a few souls," Ethan chuckled. God's sense of humor never disappoints. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the ocean. Then Victoria said something that made both of them turn. "I've been thinking, this isn't the end, is it?" Rachel tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I want to go. To see it. The places we've helped. The kids. The schools." Ethan smiled. "You'd like that. I think I need it," she said. "I spent so long trying to run away from the world. Maybe it's time I finally meet it." And so she did. Over the next 2 years, Victoria traveled the globe, visiting every country where the Grace Foundation had planted seeds of hope. In Uganda, she held hands with children learning to read under a tin roof. In India, she helped serve food at a feeding center that bore her name, though she insisted they remove it. In Brazil, she hugged a mother who told her, "My son is alive because of your hospital." Victoria wept more times than she could count, not out of sadness but gratitude. Every smile she saw felt like a message whispered straight from heaven. "This is what I made you for." Years passed. The movement didn't slow, it multiplied. From one act of generosity came thousands more. Business leaders began following her example. Ordinary people started giving what they could. Churches, companies, and volunteers came together across nations. Even the most cynical commentators eventually admitted it. The Grace Foundation has become one of the largest faith-driven humanitarian movements in modern history. And at its heart, not a preacher, not a celebrity, not a politician, but a once-broken widow who'd mocked a mechanic. One evening, as Victoria prepared to speak at the 10-year anniversary of Grace Motors Church, she stood backstage in the small auditorium. Ethan and Rachel waited beside her. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked. Victoria took a deep breath. "Not really, but I've learned that that's when God shows up the most." Rachel smiled. "You'll do fine. Just tell the truth." When Victoria walked on stage, the crowd erupted in applause. The sanctuary, once a humble garage, was now a radiant community center filled with hundreds of people from every walk of life. She waited for the applause to fade. Then she spoke, calm, sincere, her voice trembling with emotion. 10 years ago, I mocked a man of faith. I told him, "If you fix my car, I'll marry you." What I didn't know was that God was about to fix something much more broken, me. The room went silent. I came here full of pride, bitterness, and grief. But God used this place, this garage, these people, to rebuild me piece by piece. I thought wealth could fill the emptiness. I thought power could heal the pain. But the truth is, Grace did what money never could. She looked toward Ethan and Rachel, her eyes shimmering. Because of one act of humility, millions of lives have been touched. And if you're wondering whether your small act of kindness matters, it does. Because grace multiplies. The room rose to its feet, clapping, cheering, crying. Ethan bowed his head, tears in his eyes. Rachel smiled, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. And Victoria, once the lonely widow who mocked God, now stood radiant, redeemed, and free. That night, as the celebration faded and everyone went home, she stayed behind for a while. The lights dimmed. The old garage doors, still part of the original building, creaked softly in the wind. She ran her fingers along the wall where her story began. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You did it. Lord, you really did it." The waves rolled endlessly against the California cliffs, just as they had the day Victoria Hale's Lamborghini had broken down all those years ago. But everything else had changed. The woman who once stood there, sharp heels, sharper tongue, had been replaced by someone gentler, lighter. Her laughter came easily now. Her eyes carried peace. It had been 15 years since that day outside Grace Motors. And in that time, 1,000 miracles had bloomed in the cracks of her once broken heart. At 62, Victoria still rose before the sun. She'd sit on her porch, a warm cup of tea in hand, and watch the horizon blush awake. Her home was smaller now, a cozy wooden house perched on a quiet hill near the ocean. The walls were covered not with art, but with photos. Smiling children, crowded churches, volunteers in faraway villages, faces from every corner of the world. Each picture told a story, each one a reminder that grace, once planted, never stopped growing. She called it her garden of proof. That morning, a knock came at her door. It was Rachel Cole, still radiant, though streaks of silver now danced in her hair. Behind her stood Ethan, older, but just as calm and kind as ever. "Morning, Vic," he said warmly. "Ready for the big day?" Victoria smiled. "I've been ready for 15 years. They drove together to the grand opening of Grace International Academy, a sprawling campus in Atlanta, Georgia, built for underprivileged youth from across the world. It was the 100th major project funded by the Grace Foundation. As they arrived, hundreds of students lined the entrance, waving handmade banners. "Thank you, Miss Victoria. God blessed you through you." She tried to smile, but her eyes blurred with tears. Ethan leaned close and whispered, "You're not supposed to cry before your speech." She laughed softly. Too late. Inside, the auditorium filled with hundreds of guests, pastors, families, children, dignitaries from nations that had been transformed by her giving. Rachel stood at the podium first, introducing her friend. 15 years ago, this woman walked into our small garage angry at the world and found a God who wasn't angry back. Today, millions walk in her footsteps because she decided to give everything that didn't matter to gain what did. When the applause subsided, Rachel turned toward Victoria and said softly, "Your turn." Victoria walked slowly to the microphone, her cane tapping lightly against the stage. The room fell silent. She looked out over the faces, young, old, black, white, rich, poor, all woven together by one thing, love. Her voice trembled as she began. "When I was 37, I lost everything that gave my life meaning. My husband, my faith, my reason to wake up in the morning." A hush fell over the room. I tried to fill the emptiness with money, with parties, with noise. But all it did was make the silence louder. She paused, taking a deep breath. Then one day, God used a broken engine and a humble mechanic to fix something far worse than a car. He fixed me. Ethan lowered his head, smiling through tears. Since that day, I've learned that miracles don't always come with lightning or choirs. Sometimes they come wearing grease-stained hands, speaking with patience, whispering, "God can fix a heart if it's willing." Her eyes glistened as she looked toward Ethan and Rachel. "You taught me that grace isn't weakness. It's strength under mercy. And when you give it away, it multiplies faster than anything money can buy. The room erupted in quiet sobs and sniffles. If I've learned anything, it's this: God doesn't waste pain. He recycles it into purpose, into peace, into power. So if you're here today and your life feels broken, congratulations. That's where he starts. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, weeping, shouting, "Amen." Victoria stepped back, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered into the microphone, "To God be the glory, always." Later that evening, after the ceremony, Victoria wandered through the school courtyard. Children laughed, running between the new buildings. The smell of fresh paint and new beginnings filled the air. A little boy ran up to her and tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Victoria, are you the one who built this school?" She smiled, kneeling down to meet his eyes. "No, sweetheart, God built it. I just helped carry the bricks." The boy grinned. "Then I want to carry bricks too." Victoria's voice broke as she said, "You already are." He hugged her tightly and ran off. That night, back at her seaside home, Victoria sat alone on the porch. The stars above shimmered like diamonds scattered across a velvet sky. She held her old Bible, the same one Ethan had given her, still smudged with grease and love. Inside the cover, she'd written one line years ago: "Grace fixed what grief broke." She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for letting me see what love can build when pride gets out of the way." The waves below whispered back, endless and gentle, like a lullaby from heaven. A few months later, Victoria passed away quietly in her sleep, a smile on her face, her Bible resting on her chest. Her funeral drew thousands from across the world: pastors, children, families, strangers whose lives had been changed by her generosity. Ethan gave the eulogy, his voice trembling but sure. Victoria once said God used a broken car to reach a broken soul. But the truth is, he used her to reach all of ours. He paused, glancing at Rachel, tears in his eyes. She gave 70% of her fortune, but she gave 100% of her heart. And because of that, the world is forever changed. The congregation stood in silent respect. Outside, the ocean wind carried the faint echo of her favorite verse, read by Rachel through tears. "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you." And somewhere beyond the sound of the waves, it felt like heaven was smiling. Epilogue. 10 years later, a group of children in Nairobi, Kenya, gathered for class at the Victoria Hale Learning Center. On the wall behind the teacher hung a single framed photograph: Victoria, standing between Ethan and Rachel, all smiling. Beneath it, engraved in bronze, were the words she had spoken that night years ago: "He didn't fix my car. He fixed my faith." The children recited it every morning before lessons, not as ritual, but as promise. Because long after the money was spent and the headlines faded, her grace remained, living, multiplying. A legacy of light.